definitely, definitely let me know. Okay, so we've already done etiquette reminders.
I'm joined by Nicole Bond.
No, we don't need that. So in session 3, we just discussed the conflict cycle, button pushing, the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, which we also discussed in session, I believe 1 and 2. We also discussed the power struggles, how to prevent, escape, repair, and re-energize, pre-teaching, iMessages, teachable moments, and the impact of trauma on youth behavior. So for today, we are going to distinguish between effective and ineffective consequences, learn how to implement and enforce effective consequences for non-compliant behavior, be able to implement an effective behavior contract, and understand the importance of consistency in behavior management. So if you all remember from, I don't know why this is here, but this is really like, let's get this bar. There we go. So if you remember back from Pride, we discussed in there consequences or punishment versus discipline. And then outside of that or after that is implementing a consequence. So a consequence is what really happens, not what we intend to happen. So scholars, they use the following terms for implementing consequences. So we discuss reinforcement, which increases that future behavior, as well as punishment, which decreases future behavior. So in this sense, punishment doesn't necessarily mean you're providing like a punishment of like spanking or something like that. We're talking about what we can put in place that's going to decrease that behavior, what we want to see instead of that negative behavior. So other words for reinforcement include incentives and rewards. So you might see that. We might say something like what's motivating to them to earn that, that incentive. And we will use consequence instead of the word punishment because punishment has a slightly negative connotation versus discipline. It removes the power from the child, and we don't want to do that. Now you don't want to work. There we go. So effective consequences. So this is a core element. These are things that we really want you to take from this training. Once firm and clear limits have been established, following through with consequences for non-compliance is key. You don't want to not follow through because then that child is going to believe that you don't mean what you say. You're never going to be able to get them to follow through on something if they don't see that you're following through. So again, we're always modeling our behavior to ensure that the child is, learning from that. We all know that child development comes from our environment, our culture, our families, and things like that. So we want to make sure that we're always modeling what we want them to go out into the community to utilize. So we want to remember that effective behavior management is one of the 3 key, I can't say that word, 3 key parts to youth success and youth success in foster care. And following through, of course, with consequences for positive behavior is also just as important. It's not just about the negative behaviors that we see. So for example, Cedric is late for basketball practice and his coach yells at him and says, "Don't be late again." The next week, Cedric is late and the coach responds in the same manner. And Cedric continues to be late for practice throughout the season. So telling him don't be late doesn't necessarily change anything. We need to put something behind that. So we want to look at the opposite. So Cedric is late for basketball practice and his coach makes him sit out for the next game. Cedric is not late for practice for the rest of the season because he knows if he's late, he's not going to be able to play and he might be on the path to a scholarship, things like that. So he wants to make sure that he is not sitting out of the game and there's scouts out there watching. So we want to make sure that when we're implementing a consequence that there is something tangible behind it, something that's going to motivate them to not be late or to not engage in that behavior. So for some of us, we actually use logical and natural consequences without even knowing it sometimes. So what's the difference between a logical consequence and a natural consequence? So I think it comes up. So when possible, avoid unrelated consequences and use a natural consequence instead. And we're going to get into some examples. And when a natural consequence is too severe, unsafe, it is important that parents step in to implement a logical consequence instead. So when we're looking at these, so something like a natural consequence that I always use is when children are staying up late. They're up on their phones, they're playing their video games, or they're up just chit-chatting through the night, and then they have to wake up at 6 a.m. to get ready for school, and they're exhausted and they don't want to go. And it's a power struggle to get them up, eat breakfast, get dressed, get them out of the door in a timely manner. So then they go to school extremely exhausted. Natural consequence. Hopefully in the future they will know, okay, I don't want to be tired, I didn't pass my test, or whatever the case may be, but it's just a natural consequence. The environment kind of took care of that and supported you in that. So this form discusses logical versus natural consequences. And it will be in your foster parent training manual. So we can go through some examples of them. I can see it. I will just tell you. So when we are looking at a child not going to bed, or we've already done that one, not doing their homework, what would be a natural consequence that comes from that?
Bad grades.
Perfect. Bad grades immediately. And we know that some of our kiddos, their activities are contingent on those bad grades. Now, what about for a logical consequence? Something that I don't want to say logically will happen, but is there an example that anyone can give?
Yeah, not letting them watch television. Like, you got to come in. Normally, you can come in, you can watch TV for maybe like 30, 45 minutes, whatever, hour, and then start your homework, or eat a snack and then start your homework. But then you notice they're not doing their homework. They're only always watching TV, eating a snack, and doing what they want. Then you're like, okay, from now when you come in, you're just going to go straight and do your homework. You'll have the snack after I think you finish your homework, and you can watch television later on that evening. So I think that would be a logical consequence, right?
Yeah, perfect. Yoli, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, yes, it's something that you would make up, right? You would implement. So yes, absolutely.
Okay, let's do another one. Let's see. Sneaking out. What would be a natural consequence for sneaking out?
They can get picked up by the police. They could get hit by a car. They could get hurt. You wouldn't know because they snuck out.
Kidnapped. I heard that one too. Yeah, absolutely. It's a natural consequence of them sneaking out of the home. So we're always having to tell them, well, this is what can happen to you if you are leaving, especially if it's, middle of the night.
Right.
And then what will be a logical consequence for sneaking out?
Logical consequence. That you probably want, like, say if they want to go to the mall, they want to hang with their friends maybe during the day or at a regular time, you're not going to be able to do that because I can't trust you because you're always sneaking out. So then what makes me believe that I can trust you when you go to the mall, that you're going to do what you are, go exactly where you say you're going because you're already sneaking.
Absolutely. I was that teenager. So absolutely. You sneak out of this home, or how can I trust that you're going to be exactly where you say you're going to be at?
Right.
That's not good. I need to know that when I send you out into the world, that I trust that you're going to, one, be where you're supposed to be, and two, that you're going to come back safe.
Right.
So perfect. So now we're going to go into some of the four main consequences that are commonly used. Some of these do not work for every single age range, and that is okay. Every child is going to be different as well. Somebody's chronological age might say, teenager, but developmentally and cognitively, they might be, younger than that. So some of these, we have to kind of be creative with the child and look at the situation and then say, okay, what's going to work best? And sometimes that takes us, you reaching out to us and saying, you know what, this happened today. I don't know which consequence I should implement. Can you support me by collaborating or troubleshooting these things so we can come up with something that's going to be effective? And also not too much, we don't want to turn this into like again, a power struggle or a task for you. We want you to be able to, implement these consequences. Of course, it's not going to be fun, but We don't want you to get to a space where it's getting to be difficult to come up with something. So please feel free to reach out. Okay. So we're not going to break into groups. If we were in person, that would be great. But, okay. So before we get into the 4 types of consequences, which are time-ins, timeouts, which I know we've discussed before. Some of you might have heard them outside of this. There's also work chores, a behavior contract, and restitution. And then of course, removal of privileges. So there's several things that we can do. So when we're teaching compliance and trying to implement these effective consequences, we want to give a clear and direct instruction. We don't want to be, especially if we know a child is not able to receive multiple tasks at a time, we want to be clear. I want you to do this. So in that first video that we saw of, in 5 minutes, we're going to turn off the TV and you're going to clean your room. For some kids, that might be too much. So we want to just be clear and make sure that we're being direct with them. We want to allow a brief period of silence for processing. So we got to give them time to kind of think, okay, what are they asking of me? What's the expectation? If your child does not begin to follow instructions after that period of time, give a warning. If you do not do blank, then this will occur. This is the consequence of you not following through. And then again, allow for them to process what's going to happen. And if they still don't follow through, since you want to say, since you did not do this, this was the consequence that you'll now receive. Very simple, very direct. And then hopefully by that point, the child understands, oh, shoot, I'm about to lose that. But sometimes if you see that, that means that whatever you're, what's motivating them or whatever you're saying is going to be a consequence or an incentive prior to that, it might not be strong enough. So you want to always provide a strong enough incentive for them to be able to follow through, to not have to receive a consequence, if that makes sense. So if I say, you know, if you don't clean up your room, you're not going to be able to watch TV. And then the consequence is watching TV or losing TV. Sometimes that might not be strong enough for them to actually follow through with what is being asked of them. And then of course you want to stay calm. I know sometimes our face tells on us, but we want to make sure that we're maintaining that, staying calm and showing that child, like, this is not something that I want to turn into a big deal. There's no need for us to get into a power struggle about it. We're just going to, let's just talk about it. And you know, you're going to get a consequence. That's what it is. So timeouts and time ins. So for some kiddos, a timeout, that doesn't work for some of our kiddos, especially those who have endured trauma. Isolation can be very traumatizing and triggering for kids. So we want to make sure that if there is some sort of history there, that let's talk about it. Let's see if a timeout is going to be helpful. And even if it's a minute, sometimes again, that isolation can be too much. So that's why we've also looked at time ins. So we've all heard that that's enough. You need to go to your room. But how effective is that? What are we actually teaching them? Are we showing them like what's to be expected, or are we just saying you need to go to your room because I'm tired of dealing with you? So we want to make sure that we're definitely communicating. We want to look at what that short-term impact is going to be. So it could impact your relationship in that moment where you have to go back and repair. And then for long-term, again, that trauma that's there because of that isolation that they've potentially endured in the past, that can bring up some of those negative feelings, and we might see a behavior and things like that. So that can be the long-term impact, and not being able to unpack that invisible suitcase and learn how to repack it with something positive. So we want to make sure we're turning what could have been a negative situation into making it as positive as possible. So a timeout, like any other consequence, is only effective if administered correctly. It's timeout from a positive reinforcement. And then of course we want to consider that they may benefit from a time in rather than a timeout. But a timeout should help to increase a positive behavior. It's something that we want to see more of. So
I have a question, Jasmine. You said a time in.
Mhm.
A time is like, say, okay, we know timeouts when you go to your room and sit down or whatever, think about what you did or what happened. But
Mhm.
a time is when you say, like, come sit by me for a little bit, you're gonna sit right here and sit by me and do. Is that a time in?
Absolutely. That is a time in, because you are removing that child from the environment that is causing them either stress or that's escalating, and then saying, hey, come sit with me. Sometimes that doesn't necessarily require any conversation. Sometimes it's a 5-minute break where you're like, okay. And then you review the house rules or the rules of playing together and things like that. And then you say, okay, try again. But in some cases, a time in can be something like, I'm cooking dinner, so you can come help me cook dinner, remove them from the situation. So there's different ways to do a time in.
Okay.
But yes, that is the general idea. So perfect. So if you are going to implement a timeout, you want to make sure you have that area set up already to use it. So we don't want to be preparing the area like, hey, you need to go do a timeout in the living room, and it's, maybe it's laundry day and there's still stuff on the couch. We want to make sure that area is free and clear of any distractions and things like that. And then you want to monitor them. So you definitely, something called like a planned ignore is you're still able to keep an eye on the child, but you're not necessarily giving them the attention at that moment. You're just giving them time to kind of decompress from that situation. Or you can accompany them on their timeout and say, hey, let's go sit down together. And that's okay too. You can walk them to that timeout area. The length of time of stay in time or staying in timeout varies based on the age. And the typical rule of thumb is 1 minute per year of age. So we never want to go over that. So if they're a 2-minute timeout is perfect. Anything more than that could lead to for surely a behavior and possibly an outburst. And that's something that we don't want to do. We want to remove any positive reinforcement from the timeout area. And then, so there shouldn't be any toys. There shouldn't be anything there like a tablet, their cell phone. This is a timeout from those things. You don't want to engage the child while he or she is in the timeout unless there's a safety concern. So giving them that break, this is that time where you're saying, okay, I need to take a break, figure out what I'm going to say to the child to discuss this incident. And also giving them time to decompress and process as well. Like, hey, maybe I did do something wrong, or maybe the situation was escalated where a toy was taken, the child's crying, and they need time to just calm down. And then at the end of that designated time, the child can only leave timeout if he or she is willing to comply with the original request. Are you ready to pick up your toys? Are you ready to play nicely? Things like that. Flip for it. See if it'll work. Can you hear this? No. Let me see. Yoli, what did you do? Oops, go back. You're on mute.
I apologize. There was where it should say share my sound. Where did I find it? I think under
the microphone.
When you share your screen, and under share your screen, you go advanced sharing options. And it should be there where it says
oh, there it is. Okay, let's see.
Kids will be kids. They can get so wound up in what they're doing that they sometimes can't seem to find the off switch. Most of the time, we need to get involved and help them settle down. For kids that are 12 and under, that's what timeout can do. For older kids, you might want to skip to the next topic on privilege removal. Before using timeout, there are some things that need to be done. Pick a quiet and safe room, figure out how long a timeout will be, and have a timer ready. Explain to your child how timeout works before you use it. A couple other things to remember are, stay calm even if your child resists, and remove yourself as soon as you set the timer. Okay, so let's take a look at how a timeout works in action.
So how did it go at work?
Oh, pretty good. This new guy, Javier. Oh, he's crazy.
Really?
Yeah.
What time is it?
It's almost 8. Time for your show?
Yep. Mom, can I have some juice drink in the living room?
Sure, as long as you're careful. The juice is in the fridge. So the new guy's working out really well.
Yeah, he's good. It's good to have some help. Maybe I'll have some time now.
I was just pouring it. It fell.
It's all right, Carlo. Accidents happen. Let me get you something to clean it up with.
But I'll miss my show.
No, you won't. It will just take a minute.
It wasn't my fault. I shouldn't have to miss my show.
You won't. Here, this'll help.
No!
Hold it. You need to clean this up.
No, I don't.
Carlo, you can either stay here and clean this up, or you can go to timeout. Those are your choices.
It wasn't my fault.
You're not doing what we asked. That's a timeout.
Fine! My show's gonna be over!
Roberto and Gino were clear and calm when they asked Carlo to clean up his accident. It was only after Carlo refused that they gave him a timeout. They didn't get sidetracked by debating whether or not Carlo spilled the juice on purpose, and they didn't feel that they needed to give in because Carlo wanted to watch his show. Even though it was hard to leave the spill until after timeout, Roberto and Gina made sure that Carlo cleaned up his mess. It's important that Carlo took some responsibility for his actions.
Perfect. So that just basically shows you how a time in, time out works. Again, age range is definitely a factor. You want to make sure that you're using it on the appropriate age range. And again, sometimes it's not going to be a perfect art every single time. It's not. And that's okay. You're going to be learning to troubleshoot. You're going to be learning, okay, this doesn't work for them, but maybe I'll try this next time. And that is totally okay. Again, our role here is to support you and collaborate with you on those consequences. So if something does come up where you're stumped and you're like, I don't know what else to do, I've tried this and this, let's talk about it. So privilege removal, this one is pretty big. I think most of us use this one, especially for our older kiddos. It's probably the most effective for our older kiddos. And the example is, if you do not complete your homework now, you will have no phone time this evening. And we know that, again, our teenagers love their cell phone. We know that they love their late night shows before bed. So those are things that they don't want to miss out on. So you want to always, again, choose a valued reward, something that they're motivated by, something that they are that they're going to want to work for. We're not going to choose privileges that are important to treatment, such as, calls or visits with resource parents. It's not or bio parents. I mean, that's not something that we remove. That's a violation of their personal rights. We don't want to remove them from any sort of activity that they're doing in school, such as a sport or a club or anything like that. We want to make sure that they're still able to do those things because that is an outlet for them. And then, of course, family fun time. We never want to isolate them from things that you're doing as a family. We want to make sure that you're continuing to bond. Just because a behavior occurs doesn't mean that you're no longer part of the family. Respect shouldn't go out the window when we are upset with one another. You want to limit the number of privileges removed. You'd never want to do multiples at a time. That can really set someone off. Even for me, multiple consequences being or privileges being removed from me would absolutely upset me too. Limit the length of time. Of course, you never want to go too far with it. Again, if you're feeling like it might be too short of a time, let's again talk about it. 2 weeks to remove something could be too long of a time for a kiddo. So let's make sure that we're identifying that length of time that's going to work and it's appropriate. And then, of course, being clear and sticking with it, following through. Like, hey, the reason why this is still removed from you is because, we discussed when you engage in this behavior, this is going to be the consequence. And we, again, like I said, we shouldn't be adding more things to it. Okay, well, nope, you did this, so now I'm going to add this to that. It's not relevant to that consequence at that time. So you want to be careful with that. Now, in some cases that with like our cell phones and stuff, if we're seeing that they're constantly using it inappropriately, then of course we need to discuss whether or not even returning that phone is appropriate. But again, that's something that we can discuss as a team to make sure that we're not violating the child's personal rights and that we're not causing, further damage and trauma to them. Work chores is also an effective consequence for our older kiddos. Some of our younger kiddos may benefit from it, but not always. So unlike removing a privilege, a work chore gives youth an additional activity to complete. So you want to find tasks that are outside of their normal chores, meaningful, helpful, and it contributes to the family. And it's 20 to 30 minutes in duration. It shouldn't be a full day thing. So if their chore is cleaning the bathroom, and that they definitely do not enjoy cleaning the kitchen. So if they're engaging in a behavior and you're like, okay, on top of your regular chore, I'm going to also assign you, cleaning the kitchen for the next, 3 days. That'll be your consequence, and you can do that. That's not a long chore. Well, depending on how you grew up. For me, cleaning the kitchen, that is a task in and of itself. That takes me an hour because we're cleaning the sink, we're cleaning the counters, we're cleaning the side of the fridge. So for me, that was something that I definitely was motivated by. I do not want to clean up. Mine was the bathroom. Not a fan. So they do work. And then it can be given as an alternative to privilege removal. You can either lose computer time for the evening or select a work chore from the list. And that is absolutely an option. And it's very beneficial as well because it's still giving them some semblance of a choice. They're not going to like the choices, but these are the choices that are here. There is a consequence for you not following through with what I'm asking of you. So it's either this or that. Giving them the choice might make them feel a little bit more in control of what they're doing. So and then restitution. So this one, I would say, just let me preface that, please have a conversation with myself or Yoli, as well as your ASW, about restitution, especially when for things like destroying property. Again, sometimes we have to be mindful that we cannot use allowance as a restitution always. We need to come up with a plan, because sometimes that can look like a violation of personal rights. They have a right to an allowance. So in cases like property damage, we will absolutely ensure that we're including the county as well to discuss these things, to make sure, again, that we're following through with what needs to be done, and that there is an appropriate consequence, because destroying property is hurtful. Especially if it's something that we really enjoy. Some of us have very sentimental things. I would definitely say put those things up high if you can, but definitely destroying property can be damaging to you as well. So this basically just says the youth pays for destruction by fixing it or completing tasks to pay that item off. So it's not just about financial cost. Inappropriate behaviors can damage relationships too. So restitution can also include actions taken to restore the relationship. So having conversations about what happened, and then really helping them understand the value of their property and things like that. It is a perfect learning opportunity for kids to say, oh yeah, if somebody were to break my stuff, like if they know that most of our kids love their Nintendo Switches or their PlayStation, if someone destroyed that, we want to use that and say, hey, what if someone did this to you? So we definitely want to have those conversations. So an example, after a youth broke a neighbor's window, the foster family and their neighbors worked together to create a list of work chores to pay back the $200 window. And so those, again, those chores can be, cleaning up. Maybe they're, supporting with cleaning, the yard. Maybe they're helping fix something themselves. I've even seen where they help them fix the window that when it's safe, or help them fix that item. If it's not glass, of course, but that's also an option too. Showing them like, yeah, this is what the hard work it is to fix a window, or to fix this item in this home. It doesn't just, I don't have just, a lot of money. We also want to teach them the value of $1 as well. So there's very important areas to address in this, and they're perfect learning opportunities for our kiddos. So then there's the behavior contract. So for these, again, this will take the full team discussing a behavior contract and coming up with something that, again, is appropriate, and that is also evidence-based. Because for some, at least what I've been hearing is behavior contracts are not always effective. And so again, we want to make sure that we're having that conversation together to make sure that the contract is going to be effective and it's not just oh, I'm going to do this, sign, and boom. We want to make sure that there's a consequence behind it. The child understands what's being, asked of them, and that they can see it. They can visually see, oh, this is the behavior contract that I need to follow. So we make informal contracts all the time. When you're finished cleaning your room, you can go outside to play. That's an informal contract. When you finish your dinner, you can have dessert. And then we also use formal contracts. So instead of spoken agreements, these are written down. We want to make sure that the child is able to go back and read and look like, oh yeah, this is what we discussed. They're used for more problematic behaviors or behaviors that reoccur regularly. Especially like if they're having difficulties, working with it, being with their peers, resolving conflict, and they're consistently reoccurring. We want to say, okay, we keep seeing this behavior happen. We really need to figure out what's the root of it and what we can do to support this child in, getting out of that habit or that behavior. So that's when it comes to when we start looking at tracking behavior, like we discussed in the beginning. Okay, this is the behavior that continues to reoccur. We want to track this behavior, find out when does it occur? Is it morning, midday, evening? Is it something that is only happening at school? What's the setting like? Is it only happening at home or out in the community, at the grocery store, the park? So we want to start looking at what the antecedents are, what's happening before that behavior, and seeing if we see a pattern there. And then we want to look at, again, the behavior itself, like has been doing, and then looking at, okay, what is going to be the most effective consequence based on what the antecedents that we've seen in that pattern. And then in that behavior contract, once we've looked at the ABC, then we're going to explain exactly what the child needs to do in order to be successful. And of course, we want to make sure that there is an incentive as well at the end of that. Sometimes it can be something that they're working towards for a couple of months. For some kiddos, it's getting a cell phone back, or some kids it's like, oh, there's this trip that I want to go on, and a school trip, and they were working towards or not a school trip, but like a fun thing they want to do, like, oh, I want to go to Six Flags. So we want to make sure that we, okay, well, in order for us to do that, if I can't trust you in the community, then we need to start working on that. And these are the things that we're going to do to work on that. This is our behavior contract with each other that we're going to work on together as a team to make sure that you can be successful, because who doesn't want to go to Six Flags? It's a great family trip. So, and it's intended to eliminate problem behaviors, but also reinforce pro-social behaviors. And I think sometimes we also have to make sure that when we're commenting on the negative behaviors that we see, that we're also praising those positive things that we see, those positive behaviors. Hey, you know what? I saw today that when I asked you to do this, you did it right away, and I really appreciate that.
Jasmine, I'm going to need 2 of these contracts ASAP.
Okay, well, let's definitely get together and work on these together. So thank you for that. So when implementing this contract, you want to remember to keep it simple. So you want to, again, start with one behavior. What's the most important one that you feel is going to be? Maybe it's a safety concern. Maybe it's a health concern. We really need to track the priorities, and that's where we don't get into that power struggle, like, okay, I want to track this and this and this, and you're not doing this, and then it can turn into a big thing. So let's start with the most important one, especially if it's impacting safety, their functioning, and things like that. Then we want to choose a positive behavior that we want to encourage, and this can be the opposite of that negative behavior that you're trying to end. So if we see that they're not playing well with others, we want to encourage that they play well with either their siblings or their peers in school. That's something that they assess on when kids get into kindergarten, even before that. So we want to look at, okay, can this child, be able to play with their peers successfully? Now, we don't expect perfection, of course, but how is this child going to be able to implement this positive behavior? And then choosing a behavior that is not too difficult. It's best to begin with behaviors that happen sometimes and you want it to be increased. And then breaking it down into small steps is super important here. Sometimes, again, when we give too many things at a time, the child gets confused, and we don't want that for them. We want them to be successful. We don't want them to fail in this. We want them to be to engage in more of those positive behaviors. So again, when we send them out into the world, we know that they're carrying our name and and making sure that they're behaving appropriately. And then you want to, of course, help the child connect the behavior and the reward. If I engage in this positive behavior, I'm going to earn this. So if I complete my homework, for the next 2 weeks, mom, caregiver said they're going to take me to John's Incredible Pizza after those 2 weeks. So you want to connect that. Okay, if I do this, I'll get this. But it's basically, the key is to set up your youth for success. We want them to be successful. We want them to learn. We don't want them to struggle. So it's always important that we're very clear and that we ensure that they also know, like, hey, this is to not only support you, but it's also to support us, support our relationship. I want to be able to help you through this. And it's part of repacking their invisible suitcase, teaching them those things that they were doing before aren't going to work all the time and aren't going to work everywhere. So the contract should include the following: the child's name, the behavior or task to be accomplished, when it needs to be done, and the number of times it needs to be done, the reward they're working toward, a place for documenting their progress. So that can be like a token, like a chart that shows, like, maybe they chose gold stars or they chose Paw Patrol stickers or something like that, or they just an X on a box that shows, okay, yeah, they did it today, boom, and they know that they're saying, oh, I'm one step closer to earning that reward that we've discussed. And then, of course, a place for both you and the child to sign, so they know that, hey, this is a binding contract, we signed it, you were there for it. So some tips is you want to make sure you're posting that behavior contract in a prominent location, somewhere it's seen, but also if you have other kiddos, in a space that's still confidential. We don't want them to be kind of looked at or outed for, like, oh yeah, you did do this behavior. Remember what your behavior contract says? That's not for other kids to do to another child. That's between you and that child. So you want to put it in a location. Maybe they keep it on their desk specifically, and it's covered up with like a book or something, or somewhere that they feel comfortable. You both can choose that. You want to review that behavior on a daily basis, like, hey, I noticed this today. This is something that we can work on, or this is something that you did really well at, and please continue that behavior. The more you give that positive praise when you notice it in the moment and go through it on a daily basis, the more that child hears it and they're going to start doing it more. You want to provide rewards immediately for the little ones and as soon as possible for the older kiddos. And then, of course, individualize your contract. Every contract isn't going to work for the same kiddo because, of course, we're looking at different behaviors. So in your in the email that I sent you all, there's this activity. So this is a very basic behavior contract here. Has the name, the date, the behavior we're targeting, the steps that we're going to take in order to target that behavior, when that child needs to engage in that target behavior, and the reward they're going to earn. And again, this could be a every 2-week thing where you're like, okay, you did this, and now we're gonna continue this. Maybe we're reevaluating the steps, like, okay, I see you're doing this, or maybe we need to add this or remove this. This isn't working. So we can always come back and review it. And so we're gonna see a little clip of the behavior contract in action.
When I was raising my 2 boys, I don't know how many times I said something like, if you'll clear the table and do trash tonight, I'll handle the dishes alone. Or let's work together to get these leaves raked and picked up so we can watch the Raiders game on TV. In a sense, we made a verbal contract. If they help me, I'd help them, or we could do something fun together. The contract was simple, short-term, and clear. You've probably done something similar in the past. But when you're faced with difficult behavior, it's a little too simple, and you need a longer-term agreement, something in writing. A written contract is a proven way to improve behavior. Let's visit a family and see what steps are needed and how it's done.
Angela, you're going to be late.
All right, I'm coming. Have you seen my binder? I can't find it.
It's right here. Look, it's 10 after 8. You've missed the bus again.
Will you give me a ride?
What, and be late again? This is the second day this week that you've missed the bus. You need to get up earlier.
What's all this yelling about?
She's missed the bus again, and I'm not going to be late.
Will you give me a ride? I have a science test this morning.
No. I can't be late for work either, Angela. This has got to change.
Tony and I have put up with Angela not getting to the bus on time for too long. Nothing we've said seems to make a difference. We're going to try something new, a behavior contract. The problem is that Angela is not getting to her bus on time. We decided to list the steps we thought she needed to fix this problem. For example, it would help if she got everything she's going to take to school the next day ready and by the door by 10 the previous night. We also thought she would need to get up by 6:45 so she could be dressed by 7:30, then eat breakfast, clean up, and be ready to leave the house by 8. If she can do all this and change her behavior to get to the bus on time, we're going to give her more phone time as a reward. Writing down what happens every day lets Angela know how well she's done, gives us the chance to encourage her, and gives us all something to refer to when it's time for a reward.
Start with an easy behavior that you know your child can do and make sure it's something that's really clear-cut. For example, Angela either catches the bus on time or she doesn't. Break down what you want done into smaller steps. Think about it first, then talk about it with your child. Come up with steps that work for both of you. It's important to understand what it means to complete each step. For example, Angela's steps included having her things for school ready the previous night, getting up, getting dressed, and being ready to leave the house. For a younger child, you might give a simple reward as each step is completed. That can be a real motivator. Write down exactly when the behavior needs to be done. That way you know when to check to see if it got done. Angela's goal was to be accomplished every morning in order to catch the bus that day. This is how you keep track of what happens on a daily basis. Each day your child is successful, mark it down. If he is not successful, leave the square empty. Do not make negative marks. For example, Angela does all her steps correctly but is late getting to the bus, so she does not get a mark for that day. Or if she doesn't complete all the steps in order but does get to the bus on time, she will get a mark. Make the reward something your child really likes, otherwise it won't be very motivating. Rosetta and Tony know from experience that Angela loves to talk on the phone, and an extra hour of phone time will sound good to her. Kids can get on board with behavior contracts. They want structure in their lives, even though it doesn't always seem that way. The thing is, you have to be careful how you present the contract to them. It's important to set aside some quiet time with your child. Start on a positive note by talking about the good things your child is already doing. Bring up the contract as a way to earn rewards for good behavior. Then tell him all about it, in words he can understand. Tell him what behavior you want to see, the steps you think will help, when it should be done, and what kinds of rewards you have in mind. Even if your child doesn't go for it, don't be discouraged. Just tell him you're going to do your part, that you'll pay attention and reward him if you see the behavior you've asked for. Then stop talking about it and see what happens. Be consistent, stick with it. That's the most important thing.
Thanks for helping me clean up. Hey, did you like that chicken? I never made it that way before.
Yeah, it was good. Have you seen my 17 magazine?
You're not running off anywhere, are you, Angela? Have a seat and let's talk for a few minutes, okay?
There it is. I was gonna call Jen.
Would you mind calling her a little later? We'd like to talk to you for a while, okay?
Okay. What's this all about?
Angela, you do a lot of good things around here. You help me in the kitchen, you do all the laundry.
Which I hate doing.
Yeah, I know you do, but you do it, and you do a good job. You don't like cleaning your room either, and you've been doing a good job of that, too.
Okay, so where's this going?
Look, we want to just talk about the morning routine. We'd like to see it run a little smoother, and we'd like to see you make the bus on time every day.
Honey, we're not here to give you a hard time. We simply want to talk about ways for you to catch the bus in the morning and things we can do to reward you for it.
Hey, I don't need any help. What are you gonna do? Brush my teeth and feed me?
No. But we considered that.
No, of course not. We just thought if we wrote down what needed to be done and when, it might be helpful.
You've got to be kidding.
What's the matter?
My last foster parents did this, and they put it on the refrigerator, and I got a gold star every time I was a good little girl. I'm not a child anymore. I don't need your gold stars.
No. Angela, we don't want to treat you like a child, and we certainly don't want to give you gold stars.
Honey, it's not like that. Let's give it a try.
So what do you want me to do?
Look, we're talking about one very specific issue, missing your bus, right?
So?
Well, we thought that if you packed everything you needed for school in your bag and set it by the front door by 10 p.m. the night before, well, that would give you enough time, right?
I guess so.
Great. You could set your alarm, be up by 7. You could be dressed and ready for breakfast by 7:30, couldn't you?
A half an hour to get dressed, do my makeup and my hair? No way.
Well, you're right. Would 45 minutes be enough time? That would give you a half hour to have your breakfast, clean the dishes, brush your teeth. Yeah, you could be out the door by 8 o'clock. Would that be enough time?
I suppose. Well, wait a minute. That means I have to get up at 6:45. That's way too early.
But you just agreed that you needed that much time to make the bus on time, right?
I don't need this. I'm an adult, and I can figure it out for myself.
Look, how about this? How about if every day you make the bus on time, you get the phone for a half an hour that evening? How about that?
Every day?
Well, every day you make the bus.
And if I miss the bus?
Then you get your normal 10 minutes in the evening, just like now.
Yeah, okay, I guess. More phone time would definitely be cool.
Good. Where should we put it where we can all see it?
Not on the refrigerator. I don't want anyone seeing this. How about we keep it in my room?
Well, you can have a copy of it in your room to remind you of what you've agreed to and when, but we're going to need a copy to mark on when you've made the bus on time.
Okay, but not where everyone can see it.
Well, let's see. How about we put it inside the cupboard door next to the refrigerator? It's out of sight, but easy to find.
Okay, but no gold stars, please.
Nope, we promise. Now, let's fill this out.
Any questions that anyone has about the video they just watched? Anything positive, anything they did right, anything you would like to utilize when implementing a potential behavior contract?
Did you notice in the very first video how they reacted? Can you see some of the themes that we've talked about, the pushing the buttons? How it could have escalated. I know it's a script, right? But how in reality it could have escalated if the resource parent was yelling like that. And did you see she went on the counter and she was like, come on. So a child with trauma is going to react. They're not going to act how you would expect. They're going to react, and it's their survival mode, right? So I just wanted to make sure that Jasmine and I addressed that, because that isn't what you want to do in the beginning. It could have spiraled easily.
Yes.
But is it making sense? Is it making sense how important things are? Your tone, how to basically negotiate, meet the children where they're at, right? The youth and the children where they're at, and still give them that power to choose. You know, you're giving them controlled choices, right? That are going to be okay with you. But it's so meaningful to a child that has had trauma and basically has not had a choice for anything in life, right? They were removed. They're told which school they're going to go to. They're told where they're going to live. So giving them that sense of dignity, even though their controlled choices, are so important to a child that has experienced trauma.
It's, you know what, for me, I know it's learning a lot of, unlearning some things, like how I was raised and how I did my children. It's like, you do because I said do it.
Right.
Get up, get dressed, get to the bus. I'm not taking you. So now it's like, you got to be more understanding. These kids have been through stuff. And so it takes a lot of, I guess, like relearning stuff, like they say, to redirect the child. I'm like, how do you redirect a 1-year-old even? But just learning, unlearning some things, some negative things or whatever, things that I've learned, do it because I said do it, and just relearning or learning some new techniques or new ways to do things.
Yes, thank you, LaDon. That sums it up, really.
Yeah.
Where and it happens to all of us, to myself, Jasmine, when we're consulting with our ASWs or we're meeting with resource parents, we can't help that, right? We have a history too. That makes us who we are. So now we better understand that not only do they have a history, but they also have a traumatic history. And it's not just one thing that may have happened, a separation, but it's now understanding they've had abuse, they've had neglect, they've had a number of things. But thank you for being transparent and honest, LaDon. I really appreciate it. I think what you say resonates with all of us.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you. So we want to consider the following. Mom says, Allison, you need to finish your homework before going to the movies with your friends. If Allison is allowed to go to the movies when she hasn't completed her work, then she learned that, mom or caregiver doesn't really mean what she's saying, or if I beg enough and wear her down, mom will give in. So we want to just make sure again that we're following through. It's not going to be fun for you. I know it's saying no is hard. I know removing a consequence can be difficult, but again, we're here to support and guide our kiddos. So we want to make sure that we're following through, maintaining consistency and things like that. So effective consequences given within a supportive environment help youth correct aggressive and antisocial patterns. You want to make sure that you don't say it unless you mean it. That's very important. You want to say everything that you mean. Sometimes, again, these things come out where we say things that we don't mean. That's where we go back and apologize and repair. And then again, following through with what you say. So you want to ask yourself, can you follow through? Like, what am I teaching about by using this consequence for this child? What are they supposed to take from this? Who's being affected by this consequence? Is it affecting, everyone in the home, or is it something that that's only affecting maybe you? And then how willing am I to follow through consistently with consequences? So for the teen in the video, her behavior was impacting not only her because she had a science test that she was going to be late for, but also the family. They were going to be late to work by having to drop her off. So that behavior is impacting the full family. So we want to choose a consequence that's not only going to support the child going to school on time, but also to make sure that the resource parents are able to, stay at their careers. So everyone has people love their job. People don't want to lose their job. So we want to just make sure that those things are happening. And what if I give a consequence and can't follow through? You just want to simply be honest, especially with our teens. They read through all the nonsense. So if you can't follow through, you admit your mistake, and then you apologize, and then you provide an effective alternative. And that is okay. We all make mistakes. We are all learning. We're unlearning and relearning, like LaDon said. So sometimes it's going to take a lot more of that troubleshooting where we say, okay, that didn't work this time, so let's try this. And that is absolutely okay. You're eventually going to get to a space like where you say, I realize that this didn't work the last time. We're going to try something different. So we're going to go through what works and what doesn't. So these are the things that do work. So staying calm, being clear and direct. Don't back down once you've made your decision. Stick with it. Be confident in that decision. State the consequence and the time for which it is in effect. So what's that consequence and how long are we going to be implementing that consequence? You want to involve the child in deciding on potential rewards for the positive behavior. Again, following through with what you say. And when it's over, it's over. We're not bringing it up again. We're going to let it be. We've taken from that situation, we've learned from it. Now, when it starts to become a consistent thing, that's when, of course, when we discuss about the behavior contract, that's when we need to figure out, okay, something's not working here. So we need to reevaluate. And some things that do not work are harsh discipline. That just our kids do not respond to that. And again, we have to look at every behavioral incident through a trauma lens. So we want to make sure that whatever consequence that we're providing is not going to be triggering or traumatic to that child. Humiliation doesn't work. I've seen a lot of videos where I've seen parents, cutting a child's locks off as a punishment. And that just doesn't work, because that is traumatizing to that child. It's especially if it's a part of their identity and who they are. We don't want to guilt trip any kiddos or use guilt to, get them to do anything. That's not fair to them. And then lecturing doesn't always work. We can't sit for an hour and discuss it. We got to put something tangible in place, something that, okay, we've talked about it for maybe 10-15 minutes. This is what I want to see going forward. But I don't think I've ever benefited from a lecture from my mom whatsoever. I can't even remember any of them. Nothing that sticks out truly. It was more of her, when she did this and a consequence came after, that is what I learned from, and said, I'm not doing that again. I lost my cell phone for about a month, and I, from that point on, did not do anything else to lose that cell phone. So these may seem effective in the short term, but they may negatively impact the relationship. So the harsh discipline, the humiliation, the guilt, and the lecturing, just short term, yeah, seems great, but in the long term, it's just not. It's going to really damage your relationship. And then you're going to have to do a lot more work of repairing before you can even address those issues, or before that child is even going to follow through with what you say. So some common concerns is, that come up, that this consequence seems too easy. It's okay. If it's effective and it's going to work, that is totally fine. That's what we want to see. We don't want it to be, a difficult task for you to implement a consequence or something that's come out that, they're doing this with ease. Yeah, because whatever you chose is working for that child. The behavior is getting worse instead of better. So this is how it always starts out whenever we're implementing a consequence. The behavior is always going to get worse before it gets better. We tell every family that with children, especially, it's actually most commonly used when in ABA, when we first start teaching kiddos how to, what the expectations are. They tend to want to fight against that because it's something new for them. They're working towards it. And then you might see a little bit more of that escalation when it starts, because it's a change. But then eventually, as they get used to it, like, oh, they're following through, they're consistent with me, this is not changing, then the behavior will start to shift. But it does take some time. It does take that work and that energy to get to that place. My youth is too old for time out. Again, yes, there are some age ranges that do not work for a timeout. So we want to, of course, find something else that works. And then parenting a teen is a lot more challenging than I realized. And truly it is. Parenting teens is very difficult. There are things that are coming up. They're dealing with puberty. So we're seeing the mood changes. Now we're seeing that they're, not being able to function academically or socially or emotionally with, peers or in the home. So those things are going to arise, and they're going to come up. So again, that's when we start to look at, okay, I see these behaviors, I see the challenges. So let's figure out how we're going to support this kiddo. But these are some of the things that we definitely hear often. Yoli, were you going to add something? Okay, so you turn your camera on or your mic on. So when it still isn't working, if the consequences you've implemented do not appear to be working, discuss it with, your ASW, myself, or Yoli. Everyone has our number, so please feel free to give us a call so we can support you in problem solving. And then you want to consider the following. Are the privileges that are being removed, are they being removed promptly? So in a timely manner, are we waiting? Are the privileges of value to the child? Are the child's protests being ignored? Are consequences for rule violation being given consistently? And are you following through with the consequences you've given? So if you're doing all of these things, then yeah, we need to figure out what's going on. Maybe it's that specific consequence that isn't working. But sometimes it could very well be we're not giving a consequence as soon as it happened. We're not addressing it. We're waiting. Sometimes we're choosing incentives or privileges that just the child doesn't care about. They're like, oh, you can take that away. I don't